Hello, my name is Odette McIntyre, and I'm a Master Gardener with the Ottawa-Carleton Group. Welcome to this eye-opening presentation about invasive plants in your flower bed by Heather Clemenson. Heather's been a Master Gardener for over 2 years. She's had an interest in gardening for most of her life. While she's focused on English country house gardens and garden design before, her talk today is on a new subject of interest, as Heather will discuss invasive perennials and shrubs found in her own garden and perhaps in yours as well. Heather and her husband Gary have a 1-acre property in Greeley, just south of Ottawa. If you have any questions during the presentation, there's another Master Gardener, Josie, who will be monitoring the chat. So please type your questions and we will answer them at the end. Now, here's Heather.
Thank you, Odette. So I want to apologize to everyone just in case things go a bit haywire. As I said, my internet connectivity in Greeley is not the fastest. So there might be a delay in photographs appearing on your screen or in a slurring of my speech. But I understand that this is being recorded, and if the recording is absolutely abysmal because of the internet connectivity, I will offer to re-record it and do a proper version. So let's see if we can do this. So hello, everyone. Today, I will be talking about invasive plants in your flower bed and using examples from my own garden here in Greeley. I want to note that concern about invasive plants and their impact on native species in Ontario was not a major issue when we began our garden in Greeley over 20 years ago. In fact, I think the only invasive plant that we heard about at that time was the purple loosestrife. Certainly over the years, there have been many plants in our garden that were noted as being aggressive. But in fact, invasive is a relatively new idea for me in the sense as legislation. So what defines an invasive species? There was no legal definition in Ontario until the Invasive Species Act of 2015. The Act and the Ontario regulation took effect in November 2016. So that's not too long ago. So simply put, an invasive plant is one that is not native to Ontario, and its spread can be considered harmful to native species and the natural environment. It can find an environmental niche and begin to outcompete with native plants for nutrients, space, and light. Also, an invasive plant may have no predators, disease, or climatic features to keep its spread in check. Now, there are many non-native plants that you have probably heard about that are considered as invasive weeds. They pose a major threat to native plants, and I have noted some of those that are commonly listed. Purple loosestrife, wild parsnip, giant hogweed, Japanese knotweed, dog strangling vine, garlic mustard. These 6 plants are considered extremely invasive and are not sold commercially. Now, a great many plants that are not native to this country are sold commercially at local nurseries and big box stores, but the majority pose no apparent threat to native species. But there are exceptions. Many invasive plants are now listed by the Ontario Invasive Plant Council, but my talk is only about those that I presently have in my own garden. These include 5 ground covers and 2 shrubs. So I should note that all these plants that I will be talking about are currently sold at local nurseries and big box stores around the province. So let me begin with bugleweed, Ajuga rectans. Now, here's where I'm not sure how my internet connectivity works, whether or not you're seeing this slide or not, but hopefully it will appear on your screen in due course. So Ajuga rectans is a low-growing perennial ground cover native to Europe, Africa, and Asia. It is widely sold in garden centers. Its ability to suppress weeds and cover shaded areas make it popular for filling areas under trees and shrubs and for stabilizing slopes. It is beautiful in a flower bed, bluish purple flowers in the late spring. What is not to like? This is a photograph from my own garden taken in May of this year. Bugleweed is a member of the mint family, which in itself is always a warning. Plants in the mint family generally spread very easily and quickly. Bugleweed spreads through stolons or horizontal stems, you can see on the right, and they creep along the ground, and it's extremely quick. In my garden, it escaped into the lawn and had taken over 2 small areas, but luckily this plant is relatively easy to remove. I simply used a dandelion digger and managed to remove all the plants that had escaped into my lawn. However, I do like this plant and will endeavour to keep it contained in my flower beds. Creeping Jenny, I won't even try to pronounce its Latin name, is an herbaceous perennial native to Eurasia. It has been favoured by gardeners for its low stature and ability to grow in wet areas in a wide range of light conditions. This particular photograph is an area at the back of my garden around my compost pile. Creeping Jenny has probably taken over this area and was probably in some vegetation I was clearing up in my garden. I am actively trying to remove it, but that is easier said than done. Creeping Jenny grows about 5 to 10 centimeters in height. That's about 2 to 4 inches. The toothless spade-shaped leaves can vary from yellow to green, and the small flowers are also yellow. We did not buy it as a ground cover, but I did put it in a couple of planters many years ago as a spiller. And it spilled into my compost bin at the end of the season with the other annuals from my planter. As with many invasive plants, it spreads vegetatively, creating a dense, leafy mat, preventing other native herbaceous vegetation from establishing. It is very, very hard to remove once established. You can see in the photograph on the right that any node on any stem can root if it touches the ground, and it spreads very quickly. I should also note here that herbicides are banned in Ontario for cosmetic or home garden use. So it's not just a matter of a good spray of Roundup. The third plant is Lily of the Valley, Convallaria majalis. It was originally native to Europe. It's a herbaceous perennial that blooms in the spring. Its tiny white bell-shaped flowers have a wonderful scent, and I've always picked bunches of it to bring indoors in the spring because of the scent. It is considered a useful ground cover and is sold in most garden centres. Last year, my lily of the valley was spreading beyond the borders of my flower bed, so I energetically tried to dig out sections. It is extremely hard to eliminate all the roots, and even a small portion remaining in the soil can generate new growth. It will take time to remove, and I might never be entirely successful. I also learned, unfortunately, that it can cause dermatitis, because I developed a rash from trying to take it out, and it is poisonous, as are many of our garden plants. So what good reasons to take it out, or to avoid it if possible? At least now I understand its threat to native species. It will not spread into the surrounding woodland from my garden. Another widely available ground cover is periwinkle or vinca minor, also known as creeping myrtle. It is an evergreen ground cover about 8 to 15 centimeters high, that's about 3 to 6 inches tall, with small blue flowers in the spring. This particular photograph was taken in a flower bed last year. It no longer is there, so this myrtle was taken out. It is noted as being very invasive. It is more of a problem if left to grow rampant outside the borders of your garden, especially in wooded areas, as in shady woodland, it can very quickly negatively impact other native species. Periwinkle is relatively easy to remove, though its vigorous growth can quickly overwhelm other plants in your garden if not aggressively controlled. Any pieces of the root or stem left in the soil can regenerate new plants. So even once cleared, the area must be monitored for quite a while. Perhaps more often referred to as lamium, spotted dead nettle is a perennial flowering plant native throughout Europe and temperate Asia and widely sold as a ground cover. Unlike nettles, it does not sting or irritate the skin, hence the reason for the name dead nettle. Numerous cultivars have been developed. Leaf size, shape, variegation, and hairiness is all quite variable. It usually grows around 15 to 23 centimeters, 6 to 9 inches tall, and grows best in shade, part shade, in moist, humus-rich, well-drained soil. But this plant will also grow in full sun. The flowers are helmet-shaped, usually pink or purple, though they can also be white. The long flowering period of this plant extends from April right through to November, attracting bees, especially bumblebees. So in fact, it can be seen as a very useful pollinator plant. However, it too is a member of the mint family and can spread rapidly. Dead nettle is easy to cut back, and wayward stems can easily be removed throughout the growing season. Now, I included this plant as it is listed on the City of Ottawa list of plants to avoid. It is also considered extremely invasive in parts of the United States, but it is not yet listed as invasive by the Ontario Invasive Plant Council, though the mint family, of which dead nettle is a member, is on the watch list. So I want to talk about two shrubs, and the first shrub is the winged burning bush, or Euonymus alatus. It is native to central and northern China, Japan, and Korea. It was introduced to North America in the 19th century and became popular for its winged branches that are square and quite distinctive. Its small yellow flowers, though, are very inconspicuous. But as the name implies, burning bush is best known for its vibrant fall foliage. This invasive shrub produces red berries. Birds consume and deposit seeds, enabling this shrub to grow outside its planted area. While it does not grow as rapidly as other invasive shrubs, the winged burning bush can outcompete many native shrubs. And this particular plant is considered an inferior food source and habitat compared with similar-sized native shrubs. The second shrub I want to mention is the Japanese Barbary, Berberis thunbergii. This compact shrub seen here in the background has rich burgundy foliage all season long. It has been introduced for garden use as well as being used for stabilizing slopes and for erosion control. I have two varieties in my garden. The one in the first slide was called Rose Glow, and the one in this second slide is called, on the right, called Orianana. It's a beautiful golden color. Now, barberries are prolific seed producers and have extremely high germination rates. The red berries shown on both photographs ripen in the fall, persist on the shrub throughout the winter, and are carried long distance by birds, and seeds can take root in natural areas. Barberries are adapted to all soil types. They can survive in full sun or full shade and have shown an ability to acidify soil, thereby affecting native habitats. This one for me is a big dilemma. I'm not sure what to do with these shrubs in my garden. I did not know until this past year that both shrubs I have discussed are considered invasive. Now, if you want to remove any of these plants from your garden, some are far easier to remove than others. In the ground covers, for example, periwinkle, bugleweed, and lamium have proven quite easy to remove and to keep under control. Lily of the Valley and creeping jenny are perhaps the most difficult to deal with and should probably be avoided if at all possible. I would suggest that you put any plants that are removed in bags for curbside pickup. Do not put them in your compost bin. As you saw earlier, my creeping jenny has found a new home all around my compost bin. And particularly referring to ground covers, these are all very prolific spreaders. And if you have them, you might be tempted to give some away. So I would suggest that you do not donate these to local plant sales or give them to your friends. I encourage you to look at the first website on ontarioinvasiveplants.ca. It describes the work of the Ontario Invasive Plant Council, who they are, what they do, and it lists several very useful resources. One excellent resource is their publication, Grow Me Instead, a guide for Southern Ontario. It lists some of the most invasive plants in the province, including those that I have noted today. The publication is divided into invasive ground covers, wildflowers and grasses, trees and shrubs, vines and aquatic plants. But perhaps the best feature of this publication is that for each invasive plant it lists, it provides a wide range or a range of native plant alternatives that would grow well in your garden. The third website, rather a long one, I'm afraid, but it's the City of Ottawa website. If you just Google City of Ottawa invasive plants, you will find this site. It lists those plants that the City of Ottawa suggests that you avoid if possible. So in conclusion, while concern about native plant species is relatively new, and for us as home gardeners, there is no penalty for growing these plants that are sold commercially. There's no penalty for growing them in your garden. I nevertheless encourage you to become familiar with plants that are listed as invasive, both to avoid where possible and to control if already in your garden. Most especially if you live near native woodland. If you have ground covers in a garden downtown, then you can probably more easily control them. I live on the edge of a woodland, so it's probably more important that I control my garden than some other people do. So thank you. I'm very happy to take any questions. I am new to this field, so if I can't answer any questions, I will welcome any other Master Gardeners who are online if they feel they want to jump in and answer a question too. So thank you, and I guess I'll turn it over to Josie.
Thank you, Heather. Yes, well, there was one question about ajuga, which you have covered very well, I think, and a couple of questions about other invasive plants. And of course, there are still more that you weren't able to cover in this talk. First, Virginia creeper and violets are two mentioned in the same question. Mm-hmm. Do you have any words of wisdom on those?
I'm not sure if Virginia creeper is listed as an invasive plant. Myself, I don't know. I don't think it is listed as invasive. It is Is it not? I don't think it is, but if anyone else has any comment on that, Josie, do you know yourself? Is it listed as invasive?
Well, it's certainly very aggressive, but
It's aggressive, yeah.
yeah, I'm not sure if it is listed. I should check.
I don't think so, but we need to make a distinction, I think, in some ways, a definitional distinction between aggressive and invasive. I have many plants in my garden that are aggressive, that really just spread like crazy through my flower beds, and I'm forever digging them out, pulling them up, trying to contain them. But they're not considered invasive in the sense that they're not a threat to native species. So I don't know in the case of Virginia creeper, I'm sorry, we can look it up. I don't know who asked the question, but it's one that we can maybe just send an answer out if no one else online in the Master Gardeners can respond to this one.
Actually, we did have responses from a couple of Master Gardeners. Thank you.
Oh, good. Okay.
And it is not classified as an invasive.
No,
In fact, it's apparently a good native plant for pollinators, but you really have to watch the spread of it for sure. What about violets, which many of us have creeping into our lawns?
I think violets are more of a native species. I have violets all throughout the woodlands at the back of our house, and I don't think they're an invasive species unless it's a particular variety of violet that's invasive. But for me and the woodlands around our area, they're full of violets in the spring. So I think it's a native plant. I don't think it's, but it's certainly aggressive. Like we have violets throughout a lot of our lawn because they've come in from the woodlands surrounding us. So I would call it an aggressive plant, but not necessarily a threat to native species, because I believe that they are in fact, and there are in fact native violets.
Okay. What about the evil bindweed? Somebody has been struggling with this for 4 years and still now manually pulling it up.
Well, again, I think it's probably not an invasive plant per se, but it's aggressive for sure. I mean, if I think of, I remember my parents' garden in Southwest Wales, and my mother loved bindweed growing up all through her trees. My father hated it and spent hours trying to clear it out, but couldn't get it out. It is an extremely aggressive plant for sure. And I'm not sure the best way to remove it. Again, if any of the Master Gardeners have any insights into that one, I'd appreciate any comments. But at this point, it's I've never had it in my garden, so I don't know how aggressive or how invasive it is.
Apparently, it is a big problem in agricultural areas, or can. And I remember Ed Lawrence in one of his presentation talks saying that this was really a dreadful one to get rid of. So I guess like the dog strangling vine, the roots go deep and come off, they just grow again. So you just have to keep on going, keep at it, I suppose.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think we have any new questions, but I have a couple of ones. Goatweed, which is found in many Ottawa gardens. Any comments on that?
That is certainly listed as invasive. Again, like I say, if you go to the publication by the Ontario Invasive Plant Council, if you go to their website, goutweed is listed as an invasive plant. I didn't talk about it because I don't have it. Luckily, I don't have it in my garden, but it is considered an invasive ground cover. Yes.
Okay. And if we have time for one more, what about creeping bellflower? Do you have that one?
I don't have that one, Josie. Obviously you do.
Yes, I have it. And almost every garden I see, and I see a lot in Ottawa, have it. Again, very hard to get rid of. Because it has the underground tuberous roots. the best thing is not to allow it to grow, even though it has pretty blue flowers, blue bellflowers, like the ones that we grow in the garden, the peach leaf bellflower. But once it gets started, it's very, very hard to eliminate.
But is it a native plant, Josie, or is it an invasive plant?
I don't think, well, the creeping bellflower, I don't think is a native one.
Okay. Okay.
But
I don't actually know.
I'm not 100% sure on that.
What I would like to see about, I've given some thought to invasive plants only fairly recently. As I think I mentioned, I went to a workshop in the Fletcher Wildlife Garden on creating a pollinator garden, and it's in reading up about native plants for a pollinator garden that I began to become interested, and this is only recently, in invasive plants. And I find that because of all these lists that are being developed by City of Ottawa, by the Ontario Invasive Plant Council, but there's no penalty at all for selling these plants. And they're continually sold in big box stores in nurseries throughout the province. But people don't know that they're invasive. So I ponder as to why nothing is said or told, or there's no messaging on a plant. Like when you buy a plant, like you buy a packet of cigarettes, says it's dangerous to your health. Maybe when you buy a plant, it should have a little note on it that says, this plant is considered invasive in the province of Ontario. You know, we advise you not to buy it, something like that. But I mean, there's no penalty at all for buying any of these plants, and some of them are certainly very invasive. So it's an interesting discussion.
A good warning would be definitely appropriate on many of those. I agree. Well, I think it's time to say thank you to Heather for providing expert advice today on invasive plants in our gardens. I'm sure we're walking away with a new eye on our garden contents. Thanks also to Josie for handling the questions. Thanks, Josie. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today, and invite you to join us again next week for another Trowel Talk live presentation that will be on beetles. All right, thank you.
If there's any time left, I'd just like to mention that Master Gardener Julianne says the best way to deal with goutweed is to smother it. So keep covering it until it's gone.
I'm glad I don't have it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Goodbye.